Patch 1.6 of Zenless Zone Zero brought a lot of great new additions to the game. Of course, on top of the list is probably the new agents, Soldier Anby, Trigger, and Pulchra. But I mean, those three might not be everyone's cup of tea. Maybe you weren't interested in them, so you didn't pull them. What else is there to look forward to this patch? Well, boy, today I'd like to take a chance to dive deep into what was revealed in the 1.6 Epilogue story, and how a lot of it has ties to real Greek mythology. A lot more than you might initially think. It's not very often that I get to geek out about Zenless Zone Zero lore and also Greek mythology at the same time, so I feel like I just had to make a video about this. And although this patch was only part 1 of the epilogue, based on the ties to Greek mythology, we might actually be able to get some insight already into what will happen in part 2 when patch 1.7 drops. Firstly, as a big disclaimer, in case it wasn't obvious already, there will be spoilers here for patch 1.6's epilogue story. Now, with that being said though, for those of you who decided to skip over everything, I'll give a very brief overview of what happened. Firstly, we meet up with Hugo, who comes trying to find a video about children raised by devils. Shortly after this, we are contacted by Lycan, who reveals that the Victoria housekeeping is owned by the mayor of New Eridu, who is a part of the Mayflower family, one of the most influential groups in New Eridu, fighting for power against Tops, which is a group of very wealthy companies. The mayor apparently knew our teacher from Helios Academy, Carol Arna, and he is aware about the implants in our eyes, which are supposedly directly linked to our brain. Carol spent a lot of time researching ways to limit the side effects of these implants. One of these side effects is reduced ether aptitude. This is why she also created the HDD system to allow us to explore the hollows through EOS. However, thanks to the mayor upgrading our HDD system, our ether aptitude is restored to its regular levels, allowing us to go into the hollows ourselves, which, as a side note, means that we no longer need EOS, which I am very sad and very mad about. We didn't even use him once this entire patch. But anyway, after this, we are tasked to win an auction item that contains a sacrifice core in it. We gain access to this auction through the help of Hugo. Long story short, we meet Vivian there, and then Hugo steals the coat that we were trying to bid on. We then hunt him down with Lycan and nearly end up getting ourselves killed because we forget that we aren't in EOS anymore, and we try and get between Lycan and Hugo fighting. It's revealed that the core is going to be used to launch an attack on New Eridu with another sacrifice, similar to Bringer. And so, to try and find out more about this, we look into Bringer's past. And eventually we track down an old recording that Bringer left moments before he became a bad guy. Bringer was trapped in a hollow on the verge of death, but he had a revelation that allowed him to survive, but also altered his thinking. He suddenly started to think that instead of fighting against the hollows, we should embrace them to be able to survive. And then he starts making pleas to the creator. We then meet up with Vivian, who reveals that she also has a special power, and that is the ability to see upcoming tragedies around her, such as death, plague, and disaster. And when she has these visions, she can't help but cry. This is going to be very important later on, so remember that. We then see that Vivian works alongside Hugo in Mockingbird, and with her help, we pinpoint possible locations where there could be other sacrifices. So alongside Vivian and Hugo, as well as Anby and Lycan, we go into the hollow to investigate them before they become an issue. A lot happens in there, but essentially the big climax is that one of the members from Tops tracks us down, and we realize that we led him straight to the sacrifice. But more importantly, Hugo ends up betraying us, threatening to kill us. However, Lycan saves us by instead stabbing Hugo through the heart, dropping him off the side of the building. Unfortunately, Hartman Ravenlock from the Tops conglomerate is able to escape. One of the other big reveals is that Hugo himself was actually a member of the Ravenlock family, so you can consider him as a possible heir to a rich family. But the big cliffhanger of the story though is that Vivian sees a vision with tears in her eyes of Phaethon with wings falling from the sky. And remember, she only sees death, plague, and disaster. Now, first things first, let's start off with the easiest thing to speculate about, and that's Hugo. He's 1000% alive. The game went overboard this patch with highlighting a bunch of important lines in yellow. And even though Lycan says that his hand went straight through Hugo's heart, even though this line is highlighted in yellow, there's just too many signs against it. Firstly, we know that we get him as a playable character next patch, and throughout the story, you have Vivian and Phaethon talking about how Hugo would never give the impression that he would turn against us, and that maybe he's still alive. And also, I mean, as a side note, Hugo is voiced by Fukuyama Jun in Japanese, who played Lelouch that has faked his death before in Code Geass, and also Koro-sensei in Assassination Classroom, who also faked his death numerous times. And honestly, I'm kinda sad that they were so not subtle at all with Hugo surviving. Imagine if they didn't have Hugo's banner next patch. Imagine if there wasn't all that text hinting that Hugo wouldn't typically do such a thing. Imagine if Hugo didn't have that big speech about having to become the bad dragon or whatever to slay the real dragon. Then his return in the next patch would actually be surprising. But now it's expected. But aside from Hugo, pretty much every other major plot point in the first half of this epilogue story has parallels to Greek mythology. You may have already known from the start of the game and the lore trailer that our name as a proxy is Phaethon, and in Greek mythology, Phaethon is the son of Helios, the sun god, which also happens to be the name of the academy where we were from, Helios Academy. And for the most part, that was really the extent of the similarities. But now, with this patch, there is so much more. Starting with Hugo coming into the video store, he looks for a video about children of devils, which we kind of take offense to, as if he's calling us out directly. Hugo does later correct himself though, saying that maybe the video was instead about children of gods. Now, as for our proxies, our teacher and mother figure is Carol Arna, who was an employee at Helios Academy. So you could argue that this devil/god in question is Carol, and the switch up of Hugo using the term devil also plays into the lore behind her. Carol has been accused as the main culprit behind the fall of the old capital, and in the grand scheme of things, one of Weiss and Bell's main objective is to uncover the truth behind the fall and clear Carol's name. All of this can be mirrored by Greek mythology's Phaethon, who tries to confirm his parentage by traveling to the sun god's palace directly. In both scenarios, Phaethon tries to find the truth related to their parent. Now, next up is Bella and Weiss getting back a part of their supposed original powers, thanks to the mayor who knew Carol. We still don't know what exactly our eye implants do or what powers they provide us, but thanks to the HDD system being upgraded and our ether aptitude returning to normal, we can explore the hollows ourselves, which is a very dangerous thing. I mean, in just this chapter alone, we find ourselves nearly dying twice. And once again, something similar happened in the Greek Phaethon story. Phaethon asks the sun god if he can ride his chariot for a single day, and Helios gives many warnings, telling him about the many dangers that Phaethon will face, since the chariot will answer to Helios alone. But despite this, Phaethon does it anyway. Again, the eye implants or the HDD system can be seen as the quote-unquote chariot provided by Carol, allowing us to explore the hollows, which hold many dangers to us. However, the next part of Greek Phaethon's story is very interesting. It turns out that Phaethon cannot control the horses of the chariot, leading to a disastrous ride. And since this was the sun god's chariot, he's sort of carrying the sun. And by riding around recklessly with it, this was affecting the earth below. And so to put a stop to this, Zeus struck Phaethon with a lightning bolt, killing him instantly. And here is where Vivian comes into the story. You might think that her being able to see the future tragedies was sort of just a random gimmick that the devs came up with, but get this. When the Greek Phaethon falls from the sky, his sisters, the Heliades, cry tears of amber as they see him fall. What does Vivian do when she has her visions? That's right, she cries. What is the vision that she sees? Phaethon with wings falling from the sky. And just to top it all off, if you still think that this is somehow not all linked to Greek mythology, when Phaethon falls to the earth after being struck, his body falls into a river. That river is called the Eridanus, shockingly similar to Eridu. Now, the one missing link in the story is who is Zeus in the context of Zenless Zone Zero? Well, there is still one more story point to discuss, and that is the Bringer investigation. Bringer used to be a good upstanding person, but in what he thought was his final moments, he had that revelation. The revelation was that instead of trying to fight back against the Hollows, we should instead embrace them. And after this revelation, he starts pleading to the Creator. So whoever or whatever this Creator is, likely wants Hollows to consume the world and take over Eridu. This is why they impart this vision onto Bringer. And remember, Zeus strikes down Phaethon to protect the Earth. Belle and Weiss, with their powers and their desire to uncover the truth behind the collapse, could be seen as a threat against the Hollows and also the Creator. After all, they did survive the explosion from the Bringer sacrifice back in patch 1.4, possibly thanks to the eye implants. So it is possible that maybe Carol was training or preparing Belle and Weiss to fight back against the Hollows and the Creator. And so it would make sense that the Creator, or maybe the Exaltists as a whole, would want to try and get rid of Belle and Weiss. But with all of that being said, that is pretty much much the entirety of the patch 1.6 epilogue story, and also pretty much all of the Greek Phaethon story. From here onwards, it's hard to say what will happen in patch 1.7 with the second half of the epilogue, especially since there isn't much left from Greek mythology to pull from in terms of Phaethon's story. And so we'll really get to see what the devs cook up in terms of where the story goes. If I were to hazard a guess, I would think that Bell and Weiss are going to pull a Yu-Gi-Oh style Kaiba move where despite the prophecies, we forge our own fates or something like that, through the power of friendship. Who knows, maybe Hugo will be the one to miraculously save us after threatening us as a way to sort of redeem his character or something like that. All I know is that I am really excited to see where the story goes next. As I mentioned, it's not very often that I get to geek out about Zenless Zone Zero lore and also geek out about Greek mythology. While I am on the topic though of talking about the story, I will say, once again, I'm very sad that it feels like EOS is no longer of use. I hope we can still find a way for my child to be relevant. One other possible important point is that when the HDD is upgraded, the sibling that you choose to play as adapts immediately, but the other sibling sort of struggles a bit. I don't know if that's simply an in-game lore reason to keep the other sibling back at the shop as a sort of support character, or if there might actually be implications of the two having different reactions. But I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Otherwise though, I would love to hear your thoughts on the 1.6 epilogue story, as well as any theories that you may have on where things will go. If you made it to the end of the video, thank you for listening to my schizo ramblings. Hopefully you enjoyed it and maybe even learned something new. If you did, please consider leaving a like as well as clicking on the subscribe button for more videos. In fact, I may or may not already have some theories on who Yi Xuan might be based on some Chinese mythologies. But you'll just have to wait and see for that though. For now, I'll see you all in the next video. But until then, bye bye!